Hi, Glennis.
Hey, Aaron. What do you want to talk about today?
How much I hate diets.
Yeah, diets suck.
So what do you do instead of a diet?
Intuitive eating. Health at every size.
So how many times have you had to explain intuitive eating and health at every size to someone?
Like 5,000 times. But that was just to my doctor.
Okay, so how many times have you explained it to someone and then they said, but diets are the only thing I know?
That's like every time. Can we pursue health without thinking about weight?
Yes, we can pursue health without thinking about weight.
That's pretty revolutionary, what you just said. But what if you just don't like yourself at the size that you're at?
I think we need to understand why, instead of just saying I need to change.
So, what's the deal with body positivity?
Oh man, that's a long answer. I'm Aaron Flores.
And I'm Glenys Oyston. And we are Dietitians Unplugged.
Welcome back for another episode of Dietitians Unplugged. How you doing, Glennis?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Super good. Super good. It's nice to be summer. Well, summer's like officially over. My kids are back in school. So yeah, summer is like, what is summer? I don't even remember it. It was so long ago.
LA. Yeah. Well, in LA, it goes until like October, I'm pretty sure.
Well, weather-wise, right?
Weather-wise, right. I mean, I went to the beach yesterday and it's mid-September, so.
Oh, yeah. Listen.
Summer still lives on for me.
Summer lives on, but my kids are back in school. I am back to, routine bedtimes and helping them make lunches every night before they go to school. So
I know.
So
right?
I'm
it just
in the
has
routine.
a different feel. Yeah, it just has a different feel, right? Like, where'd the easy breezy summertime feeling go?
Right. Stop playing Fortnite. Do your homework. Stop playing Fortnite. Do your homework.
I wish I knew what that was. But I know every child plays it. So
yes, yeah. Everyone tag Glennis with your favorite Fortnite dance picture and or GIF. She'll get a kick out of it.
Oh yeah, I will. Yeah. Please do.
Yeah.
So we're coming back and chatting today. It's just you and me.
Just you and me going old school.
Yeah. I want to sing that song, just the two of us.
Right.
Okay,
I felt a little neglected that we didn't get to chat, and for so many episodes. So I
know.
I called my people called your people and said, right. Listen, you need to give Aaron some quality time here.
We've got to get these two together, just the two of them. I love this idea that we have people. My people are actually me.
And my people's actually me, but it makes it sound cooler. Like
we are big.
Right.
We're big news.
Fake it till you make it.
Right, exactly. We're not faking it. This is for real. We have people.
We have people, yeah.
Yeah, so we just figured we'd talk about like some stuff that's going on in the news, and then it's just some stuff that's been on our minds about what we want to communicate to our listeners, and kind of a free-flowing, freestyle
absolutely
episode. Yeah.
Truly an unplugged episode.
Super unplugged. We're like, what are we going to talk about? Like, I don't know. Let's figure something out. No, I always have stuff to chat with you about. So
absolutely.
That's the fun part, is that I don't think you and I are ever at a loss for what to talk about. So
no. Well, where do you want to start?
Well, so the big news it was a few weeks ago, but like Tess Holiday was on the cover of Cosmo, and that caused a total uproar.
Right.
And that was interesting.
And so for those of you who don't know, Tess Holiday is a model who is, I would say, pretty popular, gets a lot of different work. And I don't know how she's identifies, but I'm just going to use the word fat. I mean, she's a fat supermodel and does a lot of, like I said, does a lot of work. And I think this is the first time that she's been featured on the Cosmo cover. And I think it was Cosmo in Europe. It wasn't Cosmo here in the States.
Right. And I'm thinking this was maybe the first time and forgive me if I'm getting this wrong, but this might be the first time she's been on a really mainstream magazine cover, but I'm not entirely sure. So don't quote me on that. But I thought that's why it was kind of like a big deal. And she posted on Instagram about it, and woohoo, I'm a Cosmo girl. And that was super exciting. And then of course, the world can't just be like, great, somebody's on the cover. there was the backlash, right? So like,
Absolutely, yeah.
Piers Morgan, who I kind of hate, Piers Morgan said something about it being like, this is dangerous to put somebody of this size on a magazine because this is obesity kills kind of thing. And I was like, oh, sigh, Piers Morgan, just another reason to hate you. So anyway, so the backlash was ridiculous about like, this is irresponsible and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, good Lord. So the healthism came out.
And definitely. And I also, what's interesting is there was some pushback and clapback from dietitians as well, saying like, this is almost like Piers Morgan, like, this is not good to do. This is not positive to put someone like this on the cover of Cosmo, because it sends a message that being of this size is okay. And to me, that's still very interesting that, you and I are pretty immersed in this community. And so it still surprises me that there are dietitians who are not in this community who will say very explicitly fat phobic things online. And I was surprised to see those comments, but it reminded me that even though we have a strong community, we are still a minority voice, and we are still fighting an uphill battle, even amongst other dietitians and eating disorder professionals and therapists alike. So, I was saddened to see dietitians posting such fat phobia, but it was a good reminder of the sad state of our society.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I saw one, I'm not on Instagram, but sometimes I can see stuff on Instagram. And one dietitian had really just put a long rant on about how this is not healthy and this is representing, I don't know, it was just so much bullshit. But, obesity isn't good and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, somebody being on the cover of something, number one, has nothing to do with health. So what if we put somebody who was sort of disabled on the cover, right? It's like, I mean, I'm not sorry. I don't want to let people think I'm comparing obesity to disability, because I'm not. But it's sort of like a person who has an illness or is disabled, they may not actually be healthy. It may or may not be their fault. We don't know. I don't like to blame people's illnesses on them, but it's like somebody dove out of a, plane skydiving and broke their leg. Oops, that resulted as that was a result of something that they did, right? Like, that's kind of what I mean. But it doesn't matter. That person's ill and we need to treat them, and it doesn't matter whether their actions cause that or not. So anyway, my point being, nobody would care if you put somebody with that broken leg on the cover, like, look, I broke my leg flying out of a plane. Oopsie, that's an incredibly dangerous thing to do. Nobody would have any issues about that, or very few people. There would be no backlash. So number one, nobody really gives a shit about whether it's about somebody's health. What they're reacting to is a large body, and it's bigotry, right? Like, this is what's really coming out, and they're cloaking it in healthism. And that's because it doesn't matter whether she's healthy or not. There are many models on magazines that are not healthy, that are, suffering from eating disorders. We know this. That industry is rife with eating disorders. And nobody cares whether they have an eating disorder or not. Nobody's ever said anything. I shouldn't say nobody's ever said anything. People have made, people talk about it, but not the backlash isn't there, right? So anyway, I was just kind of entertained by everybody's incredible bigotry about, like, how dare they put a large body on. So her being on Cosmo has nothing to do with health. Yeah. That's my thing. It's like, she's not promoting health or not health. She's wearing a swimsuit. She's a fashion model. Like, that's her job.
Right. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. It's about beauty. And I think it butts up against people's bias around what defines a beautiful body. And when people, I think the common narrative is that we shouldn't display images like this because it's promoting obesity, and I
Yeah.
say, fuck yeah, it is. And like, and in a good way, like, this is about representation. This is about showing that there are all different sorts of bodies in this world, and that all different sorts of bodies get to be featured on magazine covers, on beauty magazine covers. And we need to wrap our head around that, that beauty is a social construct, and we are told what is beautiful, and really, like, that needs to broaden. That narrative needs to broaden so that we are more accepting of different types of bodies and seeing them as
and I'll
beautiful.
go a step further. I don't care about beauty. I don't care whether anybody finds anything beautiful. But here's the deal: a fashion model wears clothing that other people, in theory, are going to wear someday, right? So, like, if a large percentage of the population is in a larger body, because that's what we're being told constantly, then those people need to wear clothing. And they want to see it on other people that look like them. I know personally, when I go to buy something, I don't only want to see what it looks like on a thin body, right? I want to see what it looks like on a larger body, a body that looks maybe more like mine or even larger, right? Like, I just want to see all the looks of that, the different kind of clothing that's out there. So she's representing bodies that exist, and the people need to see them because these bodies, our bodies, wear clothing, right? Like, all bodies are required to wear
bodies,
clothing
yeah.
in society due to some laws that we have. So, like, why can't I see somebody in a larger body wearing, I think she's wearing not a swimsuit, I think it's lingerie. Like, I would want to know, does lingerie exist for my size body? Oh, look, Tess Holiday's wearing it. It must. Let me go. I'll flip to the page. Who's providing it? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's ridiculous to say, like, so it doesn't even have to be about beauty. It has to be, for me, about, like, what exists out there. Like, I want to see that clothing exists for larger bodies, and this is this is a magazine for women. So, like, all women come in all sizes. Why can't some of their sizes be represented? So this idea that we need to hide and shame and not be represented is ridiculous. So I still say fuck you, Piers Morgan.
No,
I really
absolutely.
Thank you. This is our podcast, and we mark it explicit, and I'm also allowed to. So, yes, apologies to those who don't like cursing. So anyway, I thought that it was great, and I think Cosmo has kind of promoted, like, hey, this has been Tess Holiday's response, and we support her, and so it's awesome. And I hope that we are seeing more women's bodies represented in places where we need to see them represented, right? Like, we need to know that we exist, and not just I'm the only large person, right? Like, sometimes that's the thought. My clients come to me and it's like, I'm the only fat person. I think that's how they think, right? And it's like, you really aren't. So the problem is that you're only seeing in the media, which we're inundated with, you're only seeing one type of body size. And it's convincing you that you have an abnormal body size, when it's like, you're just one of many body sizes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, again, representation, right? And I think that's hopefully something that we continue to do better at. And I think, just to give some people some context too, Self Magazine is doing some great stuff online recently around this area, and really trying to be much more inclusive. So, people like, or magazines like Cosmo and Self, I think should be praised for at least trying to do this a little bit differently and better. They're still going to make faults, but I'm pleased with that direction.
I want to take credit. I'm not going to. I want to take credit for Self's turnaround, because like a year ago, I wrote a blog post about how Self was getting it all wrong about everything in size and all that. And of course, I can't take credit because that post by no means went viral. So, like, probably nobody saw it. But
well, someone did.
I was so happy when they were like starting to do this turnaround this year and like featuring. Now, I don't know that they'll completely turn away from weight loss, but it was really great to see that they were featuring people we know. I was so excited to see that. Jess Baker. I'm trying to remember who else was featured.
Tess Holiday was on.
Tess Holiday. I think, I'm not that we know these people, but we know who they are. And I think that, oh my God, it's morning. And as I said, it's before 10. So I've forgotten her name, but she wrote the book Shrill. Oh my God, Lindy West.
Lindy West.
Wow, that was terrible. Lindy West, who I love so much and whose name just slipped my mind because it's before 10. Yeah, so it was great to see, and like dietitians who were talking about non-diet dietitian stuff and not non-diet health. So yay to Self Magazine. Keep at it. Let's have a different dialogue here. I think you'd speak to so many more women who are just so sick of trying to be something else. And I have to say that Self Magazine was actually one of the magazines that tipped me into extreme dieting, unfortunately, many years ago. And they had like a challenge that they did and, losing weight. And I was just like very frustrated at that point that I somehow couldn't lose more weight just doing normal things. I don't know what I was thinking, but so I'm really happy to see that they, they're having a turnaround moment. I hope.
Listen, I think if people, it's all about the consumer, right? So they'll do it if people are going to buy it. So I think that's our job, is if you see something out there that is more inclusive, that we need to support those companies and show them that this is to their benefit to do this work.
Yeah. And there is a magazine out of Canada called Fabulous Magazine, which is a magazine for plus size women that is not, there's no mention of weight loss in it. And they have a lot of activists in it, and I write for it sometimes. And it's, it's an evolving magazine, and it's support them if you want to read sort of articles that support, health, but not weight loss necessarily, or intentional pursuit of intentional weight loss. It's a long way to say it, but so there are magazines out there, and it would be great if we could support them. So it's good to know, like, we're not just on the fringe anymore. Like, this message is getting out, and I think it appeals to people. And I think people do still care about health, but they are getting sick of feeling like they have to change their body, and they're looking for something.
Yeah. I'd still say we're pretty fringy.
Yeah, we are. But I mean, we're getting health at every size is getting mentioned in major magazines, and Tess Holiday is like a large woman on a magazine cover, and hopefully she's not the last one. But yeah, we are still very much in the fringe. This is still a radical message, unfortunately. And I don't want to be in the fringe. I want this to be a mainstream message. I want people to at least have the choice. If you choose to diet and lose weight, that's fine. But at least, I want there to be another alternative, because that's my complaint, is that when I chose to diet and to keep dieting and to be more restrictive, I didn't know that there was this other option. Or I'd say things like, I have no choice but to eat like this because otherwise I'll be fat. And it's like, I wish there had been this movement that was saying like, yeah, but it's okay to be fat. There's nothing wrong with being fat. Like, that would have been a really radical thing for me to hear, Yeah. So I want there to at least be choice and an alternative. So.
And I think that's a great point, Glennis, that you're bringing up, because I think one of the things, and this might bleed into sort of the next article or next topic that we want to talk about, but is that, how do we talk about health at every size, intuitive eating, and body trust, and all these other things? But in the end, what people are going to do is their own choice, and they need to do what feels best for their body. And I think what you and I probably would agree on is that whatever you're going to do, just as long as it's done with some sort of insight and knowing like what really resonates in your body, and you're really tackling that sort of diet culture, like I don't care what you do. And even if you want to lose weight, I guess, I don't care what you do. I just want you to know that there is an alternative.
Right, exactly. The alternative is key, right? Just knowing that you're making a choice about, well, what should I do? What's the best way for me to go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most people are not given that choice.
Right. When there's no choice, you just feel like I have no choice but to do this kind of thing. That's how I felt. Like, it's either be fat and unloved in my mind, or diet and be thinner. And anyway, it was just not a very good choice ultimately. So, I wanted to hear like, you can still do things for your health if that's what you care about, So anyway, choice. Yes.
So can I, I think here's a nice sort of segue is like, what do you think that looks like then when people say, I want to do something for my health, but it's not about losing weight? Like, can we talk about that for a little bit?
Yes, we can.
Because I think people wrap up that, oh, it must be your idea of health must be something about weight. And how do we define this without thinking about weight? And that's like foreign.
Right. Yeah, that's foreign to many of my clients too. It's like, no. It's I'm fat and unhealthy, or I'll be thinner and healthy. And that's
right.
And they don't see that there are things that they can do for their health in the in between, or some of them do. And that's why they've come to see me too. So, but they don't know what that looks like.
So in your work, like, what do you think that looks like for helping people?
Right. So the clients I'm getting, I get a lot of people now that have a couple of problems usually. So they might have a diagnosis of prediabetes or a new diagnosis of diabetes. And I can sort of assess them and see that they also have, whether they know it or not, they have some disordered eating going on. So the first thing I want to do is address disordered eating. Like, I recognize that there are many things in the way we can eat for pre-diabetes or diabetes that will be helpful, but ultimately you can't do those things until you've sort of addressed disordered eating. So that's where I start. And what I often find is that addressing the disordered eating is ultimately helping their health, because a lot of times that disordered eating is I'm eating way more than I feel comfortable with, physically comfortable, or I feel out of control around food. And that way I'm, taking in a lot of, like, I want to say this in a way that doesn't feel weird, but like, I binge on candy bars all day. It's like, okay, so while I know like that eating sugar is fine, and it can be included in a balanced diet. It's like, well, I also know that binging on candy bars all day is disordered eating and not helpful, and will probably affect blood sugars if you're predisposed to that. So that's why I start working on the disordered eating first. And I find that ultimately is the first step in helping somebody, because I believe that we need kind of structure in how we eat. And, we need to still honor hunger and fullness kind of thing. And that's ultimately what tells us if we're eating enough. So that's where I start. What about, do you do something different, or how do you address health?
I think one of the things that I've started to do recently is doing my best to come up with a definition of health that is unique to each client I'm working with. And so what I've been doing recently is sort of like almost like getting out pen and paper and saying like, okay, like I want you to think about what health looks like for you. Like just you, forget the books and forget Dr. Oz and forget all this other stuff. Like for you, what does this word mean and what does it look like? And what's interesting is that has been really helpful, because it's getting out of, we can definitely talk about in session why weight is a part of that and where the problems can be with that. But at least we're getting to this idea of like, okay, this is what this word really means in my lived experience, and from there we've taken sort of that definition and then say, okay, so then what do we need to do in your life to apply some of these things, right? So how do we apply some of the, let's say it is, like nighttime binge eating, right? And how can we address that in a way that is not diety, meaning like a specific rule, right? So someone will say, oh, don't eat after 7:00. If you're having problems eating at 9:00, just say, I'm not going to eat after 7, right? My last meal will be 7 p.m. And the problem with that decision is it's so rooted in black or white thinking that it becomes shame driven. So as soon as you break the rule, you have all that negative feeling of shame. So what I'm trying to do is say, okay, well then why are you eating at 9:00, right? And let's talk about what is really like the cause going on in there. And there might be, it's really like, it could be so immense that discussion of what is going on at that time of night is so huge that it takes some time to really understand why. And I think that is the really like meaty or juicy part of this work, is getting down to the whys, not just like, okay, what's the plan so I don't eat after 7? Because that, to me, that is like the quintessential sort of textbook sort of approach that a dietitian would have, right? Here's the problem, here's your SMART goal, right? Something that's like specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely, and then go do it, right? And then let me know how it goes next week. And so, I think it's a lot more of getting to being comfortable with asking why and getting to the heart of what that answer is that makes this work feel different for a lot of people.
Right, exactly. And I like what you're saying about this rule, like don't eat at 7. It's like it ignores, well, what if you're actually, or don't eat after 7. It's like, what if you're actually hungry after 7? And like you said, so now you're in a situation where like, I'm breaking the rule, even though I need to, and there's shame. So getting at the root of shame too, I think there's so much shame that people bring in, like I failed at eating kind of thing.
And right. And shame around health, right? I failed my life. My life is not healthy and I'm not worthy of blank. I think there's so much there as well.
Yeah. And again, I love what you're saying about sort of helping somebody come up with what's their definition of health. Also sort of us being so focused on health. It's like, of course that's what we do, but the reality is sometimes you're going to have something, whether you want to have it or not, or whether you eat perfectly or whatever, like
right.
Diabetes it's like a progressive disease. It doesn't go away. So, just talking about how do we support what's going on with you right now. Right. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, people get very sort of wound up with this idea of health. But I would also say, like, in terms of like helping people to normalize their eating, sometimes I have to ask them to give up on the idea of health a little bit at first to get to a normal place too. And that's sort of weird for people and upsetting for people. But the reality is that sometimes their idea of health is also harming them. So it's like they have very rigid black and white ideas about what is in, and it's actually driving, like you said, it's driving the shame and then driving a lot of disordered behavior.
Yeah. So when you say, I know what you mean when you say give up on health. Like what do you mean?
Yeah. So it's almost like sometimes when people come in like, I want to lose weight, and we see that they have incredible amount of disordered eating going on, that we know that they would benefit from really fixing the disordered eating or helping the disordered eating. And as Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch say in intuitive eating, like, can you put weight on the back burner? And you can always come back to it. I think that's sort of the idea if you really want to. But the same with sort of health, like an example would be specifically somebody with, needing help with blood sugar control. I want them to let go of that just a little bit right now, because, some high blood sugar readings in the short term are probably not going to do a ton of damage while we fix the problem long term. So sort of like getting to, feel comfortable with those foods that they feel shame with, usually foods with sugar or carbohydrates, and not worrying so much about, are you eating them in a consistent carbohydrate kind of way? And which is sort of the treatment for diabetes, the medical nutrition therapy for diabetes, but sort of like letting go a little bit of worrying about what are my immediate numbers today and now, because they need to get much more comfortable with foods in general. That is if somebody has disordered eating or binge eating disorder or something like that, usually.
Yeah.
I'll just say, can we sort of shelve your immediate concerns while we get normal with food?
And the way listen, I think the way I would even boil that down is like, how can we like start even with whatever you're dealing with right now? How can we start to embrace the grayness, right? The sort of get rid of that black and white thinking and embrace some of that sort of middle ground in this work. And sometimes those numbers, right, are very black and white, and it's hard to embrace that middle ground when there's a constant black or white thinking. So I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that sort of cleared it up. But
Yeah.
I'm not saying like never think about your health. Or I have one client who is really concerned about health, and we're working, she also has binge eating disorder, and we're working really hard on normalizing her eating. And she's very skeptical because she wants to eat in a very quote unquote healthy way, which we're kind of, we're trying to redefine what health means in terms of eating. And I said, right now we can't concern ourselves so much about what's good nutrition. And she's just kind of like pushing back on that. And I said, oh, don't worry. Listen, someday in the future, we can talk about that. Like gentle nutrition is a part of intuitive eating, right? Like I'm not a dietitian who says, just eat whatever you want all the time. That's not my style, unless that's what's needed in the moment. But,
Right.
but of course, I want to get you to a place where you can talk about what's optimal nutrition for you, right? If that's where you want to go with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, I'm not, I know what good nutrition is, right? But it's like, so do most people, I feel like, or at least actually Migrette Fletcher, when she was on our podcast, had a good point, which is a lot of people know what dieting looks like, not necessarily good nutrition. So of course I want to eventually get you to a place of that. And if you stick with me long enough and we get through all the issues, can start to address the gentle nutrition piece of it. And what does good nutrition look like for that person?
Yeah.
And so I have to reassure people, I do believe in good nutrition. It's just right now you need to, it would probably best benefit you from letting go of that a little bit.
It's that emotional equivalence. How can we work on this, like making these
Right.
foods emotionally equal? And you can't do that, right, unless you really challenge some of those foods and really get to like that emotional part of like, what's the value of this food? And
Right.
and yeah, this work needs to heal that so that you can do that gentle nutrition part. And I don't think you can do that gentle nutrition part if foods are still not emotionally equal for you.
Right. And to be honest, the way I'm asking people to give a try with foods is actually not that detrimental. Like in their minds, they're probably thinking, she's asking me to eat chocolate. It's like, I'm asking you to include it in a very normal way. Like this is probably not going to send your blood sugars skyrocketing, to be honest. But the perception is that they feel like it will. I'm not asking anybody to do anything dangerous for themselves. So that's the bottom line. I'm not going to ask you to do something dangerous for your health. Good Lord.
Yeah.
And I think, but because of the black and white thinking, they do assume that, I'm including sugar. This is so dangerous. It's like, no, you can include some sugar in your diet, and you're going to have to, because the reality is most people can't go without it forever. And it just creates more disordered eating. So bottom line, I don't know anybody who can go without sugar for the rest of their lives. Very few people.
Yeah.
So let's figure out a way to do this in a beneficial way.
Absolutely. Where do you want to go from there?
Well, I do want to mention, there's an interesting blog. I think it was last week or this last week, I guess. And it was by a dietitian, and it was sort of, the title was, I am not an anti-diet dietitian. And I think a lot of our community, the HAES community, got kind of, feathers a little ruffled. People were like, oh, what is she trying to say? And it was kind of an interesting blog post about how she really does support, sort of, for the most part, weight not being a part of treatment, but that she ultimately wanted to be able to prescribe certain ways of eating, aka a diet, not for weight loss, but say like functional medicine or, to help with anti-inflammatory inflammatory issues and that kind of thing. And so my thought was, I tend not to pay too much attention to stuff on social media in general, but I wasn't that uptight about it, quite frankly, because it's like, before we started recording, you said it's like about how does somebody find their lane, right? This was to me more about how somebody's coming to their niche.
Mm-hmm.
And I also thought it was a little bit of a confusion between when dietitians say they're an anti-diet dietitian. I believe, but I could be getting this wrong, but I know when I say it, it's anti-weight loss diet is what we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
The meaning of the word diet being a diet for weight loss. So I think that there was some confusion between that and what would be, say, MNT for medical nutrition therapy for a condition where you might have to avoid certain foods or something like that. So anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting, and the reaction to it was kind of interesting too. Ultimately, I thought the person was still saying they generally believed that weight loss wasn't necessarily a goal, although I wasn't entirely sure. It was confusing to me a little bit, but
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Well, yeah. I mean,
You
listen,
read it
I
too.
think the part for me, it definitely like identify with that sort of, this is how my philosophy is evolving over time. And I think, each of us go through that in life. I think the thing that stands up to me is that it goes back to something I just said earlier. Like I don't mind saying like I'm a non-diet or anti-diet dietitian, right? And I think the reason I'm going to sort of own that part of it is because I think healthism gets wrapped up so much in our lives that that to make foods emotionally equivalent, it takes a lot of work for people, for some people, not for everyone, but for some people. And I think it's really hard to say like, this is how food really makes me feel until we have that emotional equivalence. And I think once all foods are really equal and you're not sort of policing food and you're not, rigid around your food and you're working on that piece where you're trusting your body, I think then, however you eat in that way is going to be a way that is sustaining for you and feels comfortable and supports your body. I want everyone to eat in a way to support their body. I just run into, my only problem is that I think there's, like I said, there's so much like crazy healthist, I don't like the word crazy, so many like really strong beliefs around healthism and around health that it tends to cloud our own personal judgment. And so I think it's important for us to sort of, that's where the work is. I think to work with someone like Glennis or I in this area, I think this is our strong suit. This is where we want to work, is boiling down all that information so that we can look at it from a really neutral perspective. And I just think that takes a lot of work for a lot of us just because of our society.
Right. And I also want to say I still claim the anti-diet dietitian mantle, because what I am specifically referring to weight loss diets. It's just I don't want to sit around and say I am an anti-pursuit of intentional weight loss diet. That's just not sexy at all. So it's a sort of a short form, right? And I think that that's a lot of what those of us in the health at every size community mean. And we're not talking about you can't make changes in the way you eat. That's not what we're talking about. It's specifically for me, I'm just not going to be able to do weight loss because, one, as I said to my client, I honestly don't know how to do that without triggering their binge eating disorder again.
Right.
I know how to tell somebody to go hungry. Like I did it for years. So, and I would also say, like, I don't know why you'd pay a dietitian for this. Go to Weight Watchers. You're going to get the same results, to be honest. Which is, I'm sure some people will just be like getting very angry that I just said that. The reality is they all have the same success rate, pretty much. Any kind of weight loss typically has the same success rate, which is not very good. But yeah, I also don't know how to do it at this point. Like I know how to help you get to a balanced place with eating, and I know how to sort of help you set goals if you want to do that around like including more high nutrition density foods, if that's what you want to do. But that's about still eating and not going hungry and still satisfying your need for pleasure in eating and not being hungry. So I still wear the anti-diet dietitian mantle for sure.
Yeah.
But again, it doesn't mean that I am ignoring medical nutrition therapy or food sensitivities or that kind of thing. Like I know a HAES dietitian who works on, anti-inflammatory diets for people with cancer. And that's, but it's not based on weight. To me, that's the most important thing. I come down to it's not based on weight and it's not based on something you wouldn't want to eat.
Right.
So that to me is the crux of it, is this asking you to lose weight and therefore go without foods that you would want to eat.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely.
That person who wrote the blog post, she's finding her niche. And I think that she thinks what she's saying is, contradictory to health at every size and intuitive eating. I think she may have been confusing health at every size with fact activism a little bit in terms of people's opinions on talking about diet changes and that kind of thing. Anyway, it was very interesting, and it's just sort of interesting to see where people will go with it, I guess. But
I agree.
I think health at every size can include people who are, the functional nutrition dietitians and the, anti-inflammatory dietitians and all of that kind of stuff. So I hope people will see that.
Yeah. So
that's it for us.
Right. I mean, so, one of the things we wanted to sort of touch on for this episode was, and I think we alluded to a lot of it already, but is, speaking for me, I've just like this woman who wrote this article, I think I found my lane to go in, and I feel really comfortable in my lane, and I feel like it's the right lane for me, as I sort of both am as a dietitian, but also as a person. I think it resonates with, my beliefs, both in and out of the office. And I think, what I think is important is, working with us. I think it's important for the listeners and all of our clients working to understand that our niche, right? To understand what it's like to work with us and what that sort of means and why we sort of do the work the way we do it. I mean, even though we have a podcast together, I think we each, in our office do things a little bit differently because we are unique, right? We are different people.
Absolutely.
And,
right.
I think it's really important for people who maybe say, oh, I really enjoy listening to this podcast. I'd like to work with one of these two, what that really means and looks like. So we sort of wanted to spend a little bit of time on that as well.
You go first.
Me go first. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I think I've alluded to a lot of this already. I think my work as a body trust provider has really solidified my niche, my lane, what feels comfortable in my work. And so some of the things to me are really important in my work is coming from a place of compassion and empathy and working on creating spaces where we can examine our own beliefs around food and bodies, but also to really examine how we've developed those because of our society and part of the healing that we need to do individually to help do better, but also part of the work that we need to do to understand that this is not our fault and that this is how we've been taught and it is wrong, but how to do better in many of those areas. So, I would say, as a body trust provider, that a lot of my work is sort of diving into those really deep philosophical type questions, but also like then taking it out of the office and how does that apply to me living my everyday life? And I think that's the biggest part. And so, like I've said before, is like really defining this on a person by person basis. There's no like cookie cutter method and really embracing that. So I love the spontaneity of this. I love that my work gets individualized to what's showing up in the room and what's showing up in our society. So, I think there is, I do bring a lot of context of what goes on in this world into my office because we can't ignore that. I think that is a part of what affects our lived experience in our body. So, but again, that's what feels comfortable to me. That's what feels comfortable in this work. And I think the clients that work with me that really enjoy it, that idea really resonates with them as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm sorry, body trust, you've never mentioned that before. No, just kidding.
Never, ever. Yeah. I feel like there should be a tip jar, right? Or like a coin jar.
Yeah.
If I had a nickel for every time I said body trust.
I love that more people that I know are actually doing the body trust provider.
I know, like every now and then people are like, hey, I just signed up for the training. I was like, oh my God, you're going to love it. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, it's coming up more and more.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. In terms of what people get sort of, or how I can help them is, a lot of the times people come and the first thing they say is I have like some health issues and I really want to help address them. But I also know I've tried to lose weight and that didn't work. And some people even come to me sort of with like, oh, I want to lose weight, but I also don't want to, it's very mixed messaging sometimes. Mm-hmm. Like I really don't want to diet again, but I still, and so, I don't turn those people away. I'm just clear about what I do. Like, I really help you work on health habits, right? So if really truly it's just, helping you to get to a balanced way of eating, or meal planning is a big one and taking the stress out of eating, we'll do that. More often than not, I do find most people come to me with some sort of disordered eating. And as I always say, like, this is where I want to start the work if you feel comfortable with it. But I'm always checking in with clients where, what is it that you want to achieve with our work together? And helping them sort of, if they had never even thought about that, sort of helping them to see what I saw in my assessment. And would this be okay if we worked on this? It's always a client's choice, right? So, and then basically sort of helping to make small, meaningful changes along the way and seeing what worked and what didn't. And, just sort of feeling our way. It's very individual, mm-hmm. as you said. No, I don't put people through, here's the Glennis plan. That right. doesn't exist. It's you're coming in and I'm really looking and assessing and saying like, where do I see that you could use some help? And how do you feel about that? And can we work together on that? And that's the part I love the best is that it's really sort of sleuthing to some degree about, oh, what's going on with that? And why do you think you feel that way about food? And I love that part of it, mm-hmm. Because when you ask that question, it's sort of like, I don't know why I feel that way. Or it's a very deep, painful, memory from the past of why that person feels that way about food. And that's been really helpful for a lot of people is connecting why they feel certain ways about food, and how they can sort of start to let go of that. And of course I see people that, I'm starting to see more people with pre-diabetes, diabetes, PCOS, and they have, concerns sort of about their metabolic health. And so, looking at what the general recommendations are, but what fits best for your life kind of thing. Because I don't think that there's one size fits all health and prescription. There's general recommendations, but what would that look like in your right. world? And how would you get there in a way that doesn't feel like, ugh, because just, I'm never going to say to somebody, you can never eat blah. You can never eat sugar, because I know that doesn't work. And they're probably thinking I can totally do it. And I know that they can do it for like a month or something like that. But then it's like all hell would break loose. So I don't believe in super prescriptive eating. It's more like what fits for you and what feels the best for mm-hmm. you. And coming back to honoring your body and your body signals and trusting your body, right? So trusting your body to tell you how much you need. So that's a challenge in and of itself for a lot of people because they've never spent time doing that. And they're not paying attention a lot of the times. We're living in a distracted eating world. So, I work on that. Distracted eating is a great place to start for a lot of people. So I love when I'm listening to somebody and they're telling me their kind of food story And I just am picking out the little bits along the way. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Oh, okay. That's going to come into play. Really interesting. So I love my work, and I love helping people sort of fact find in their own story, you know, and coming up with ways that they'll, they're going to change their own story a little bit.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So it's fun work.
Well, each of us are, I think finding a lot of comfort in our lane. Each of us are continuing to explore how do we help people in this work, and knowing that what each of us is going to offer is going to be long-term helpful for people, and it is valuable work. And just trying to make sure it is accessible to as many people as possible, and making sure that we're each, our practices continue to grow and get more and more traction in the community. And I think that's just ongoing work of an entrepreneur.
A lot of people come in and say, I want 4 sessions. And I'm like, okay, what do you want out of that? And, but if I happen to see some bigger issues that are going to block your progress, my suggestion is give it some time, right? Don't limit yourself. I don't want you to work with me forever. That's unnecessary. If you're doing that, then I don't want this to be necessarily, some people will need years of work. Eating disorders can take years of work. So I don't want to say that, but at the same time, I wouldn't limit it to I want this to be fixed in 4 sessions. It's well, I don't know if I can help you in 4 sessions. We have to kind of see where it goes. So I would say that the people who sort of give it the most time tend to see the best results. The people who don't put a limit on it tend to see some pretty good shifts in their thinking and their eating. So, I would just say, if you can give it time, and we'll figure out a way to make that work for you.
Yeah. I think that's key, because this healing does take time, and for some it is years.
Well,
and just being upfront about that is really important.
Yeah, I would say, eating disorders can take years of work, because there's so much to unravel, right? There's so much to unpack, and changing your ways of thinking and that kind of thing. That can take some serious time. We're talking about if it's, related to trauma, that can take a lot of time. So, but generally I find people with some disordered eating, it takes a little less time, but it still takes time. And I would say putting the pressure on yourself to be fixed in a certain amount of time is another diet rule in a way. So I want to try to avoid those. So if you can try to give it some time, even if we don't work as frequently as we could, it's still helpful to keep the work going for a little bit. And people say well, how long will this take? And I'm like, God, I don't know. I just met you. So I don't know exactly how long your particular problem will take to get solved. But I will help you to see progress for sure. So give yourself the gift of patience and time if you can.
Awesome. Well, Glennis, I think we covered most of the stuff we wanted to talk about. Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
I don't know. Do you want to roll end credits?
Roll and scene. No, listen.
Yeah.
I would just say that, for each of us is, to work with us, our websites are always in the show notes. If there's questions, you can always email us, and we'll continue to sort of talk about different topics that keep coming up, and we have a bunch of interviews planned for coming up soon. So
tell us your email address so people know so they don't have to take an extra step.
Yeah. So my email is aaronflores@gmail.com. And to reach the show, you can just email dietitiansunplugged@gmail.com.
And my email address is Glenys, Glenys @daretonotdiet.com. Just so, in case people are I want to email them, but I don't want to see the show notes.
But that's where all the magic is.
I know. Do go and check out the show notes. The magic is in the show notes for sure. The extra magic.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a wrap on episode 45, wouldn't you say?
Sweet.
It
was nice. It was nice talking to you.
Always. And so we just wanted to give a couple end show credits. So this episode of Dietitians Unplugged has been produced by Aaron and Glennis. Post-production is done by Toby Lyles at 24 Sound. And we also want to thank Dylan Wright for creating all the music for this podcast. So thank you to all of them for helping us make this show possible. We really appreciate your efforts and your work. And keep listening, and we'll be back soon for another episode of Dietitians Unplugged.